They told you he was the villain, the cold-blooded professor who bullied students and murdered Dumbledore without flinching. But what if everything you thought you knew about Severus Snape was wrong? What if the man in black wasn't the monster, but the one holding the line when no one else could? In the next few minutes, you're going to see why Snape's story isn't just tragic. It's the most misunderstood arc in the entire Harry Potter universe. And once you hear it all, you won't see him the same way again. You know, not all villains start out evil. Some are just born into chaos and handed a one-way ticket to suffering. Severus Snape was one of them. Born on January 9th, 1960, to Tobias Snape, a muggle with all the warmth of a brick wall, and Eileen Prince, a witch with a family name but very little peace, Severus grew up in a house where love was more of a rumor than a reality. The kind of place where silence was louder than screaming and doors slammed more often than they opened. Not exactly your classic fairy tale beginning, huh? From a young age, Snape was the kid who flinched when someone raised a hand too fast. His house in Spinner's End was dark, damp, and about as welcoming as a Dementor's hug. He wore hand-me-down clothes that probably had more personality than his father, and his only escape was magic, both literally and metaphorically. Imagine being a child who could make things float, but couldn't lift the heaviness inside his own home. That's the kind of contradiction that shapes you deeply. And of course, let's not forget how being a half-blood in a divided world doesn't exactly come with a support group. He wasn't embraced by muggles, and among many purebloods, he was barely tolerated. So what do you do when you don't belong anywhere? You start building your own walls, one cold stare and sarcastic remark at a time. Snape didn't just become bitter, he was brewed like a slow potion, one painful ingredient at a time. His childhood wasn't just lonely, it was silent, the kind of silence that echoes, where you talk to yourself because at least that voice won't yell back. It's no wonder he clung so tightly to the first person who showed him kindness. We'll get to her in a minute. But in that silence, something else was forming too, intelligence, cunning, and a desperate need to matter somewhere, to someone, even if that meant turning to the darker paths later on. And look, this isn't a pity party. It's perspective. You don't need to excuse his choices, but understanding them. That's where the real magic starts. Snape's childhood was a storm. He never really escaped. It just followed him into adulthood wearing different disguises. And if you think this part was tough, wait until you see what happens when a little red-haired girl walks into his life and changes everything. She was everything he wasn't. Lily Evans was light where he was shadow, laughter where he was silence, and kindness in a world that had only taught him fear. When Severus first saw her making a flower bloom in the palm of her hand, it wasn't just magic, it was salvation. That one moment in a dreary park sparked the kind of friendship that gives a lonely kid a reason to wake up. He introduced her to the magical world, sure, but more than that, she introduced him to something far rarer, genuine affection. For a while, they were inseparable, like two halves of a secret only they understood. Even before Hogwarts, they shared a language of wonder, discovery, and escape. It's almost poetic, how the outcast boy and the bright, curious girl found a sanctuary in each other. But like most good things in Snape's life, this one came with an expiration date. Because magic can bind hearts, but choices split them wide open. See, Lily was brave, open, and inclusive, qualities that didn't sit well with the crowd Snape started gravitating toward. He was drawn to the darker corners of the magical world, and those corners were filled with people who didn't just dislike Muggleborns like Lily, they despised them. It was like he was playing tug-of-war with his own soul, one side loyal to Lily, the other desperate for power, belonging, respect. Unfortunately, power won. Then came the moment. The moment. After years of growing tension, resentment, and humiliation, especially at the hands of James Potter, Snape snapped. He called Lily a mudblood. Yep, that word. The magical equivalent of slapping your best friend and setting the bridge between you on fire. And while he begged her forgiveness afterward, some things just don't get taken back. Not when they cut that deep. Now, to be fair, Snape wasn't evil. He was broken. But broken or not, that word ended everything. And you know what's worse than losing your only friend? Losing her because of your own actions. He didn't just lose Lily, he lost the last piece of himself that could have pulled him back from the edge. And guess where that edge led? Right into Hogwarts, into House Slytherin, and into the waiting arms of a certain Dark Lord. When Severus stepped into Hogwarts for the first time, it should have been a fresh start. New halls, new robes, new chances. But of course, life had other plans, and they weren't exactly wearing green and silver robes. He was sorted into Slytherin, while Lily, his only anchor, went straight to Gryffindor. And that little house rivalry? Yeah, it's not just for Quidditch. It's where childhood friendships go to die. Or worse, slowly wither under the weight of pride, pain, and peer pressure. Now imagine being brilliant at everything, and still somehow the punchline of every joke. That was Snape's daily routine thanks to the Marauders. James Potter and Sirius Black leading the charge, while Remus played quiet observer and Peter mostly squeaked. They didn't just bully him, they humiliated him. Publicly. Repeatedly. The infamous upside-down pantsing incident. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix gives you the unfiltered flashback. It wasn't teasing. It was psychological warfare with wands. But Snape didn't just take it. He retreated into his mind, sharpened his skills, and got weirdly impressive. He was a genius in potions. Like the kind of genius that makes the professor look underqualified. He also developed a talent for the dark arts, not just studying them, but understanding them. There's a fine line between interest and obsession, and Snape practically tap-danced on it. But hey, when the world keeps kicking you down, power starts looking a lot like protection. He also started writing in his textbooks. Yeah, the dude annotated like a pro. Not with cute little notes, but with brand new spells. Invented them. Modified existing ones. Sectum Sempra? Anyone? That one didn't exactly say, for cosmetic use only. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry finds Snape's old textbook, filled with deadly brilliance. And let's not skip the nickname, the Half-Blood Prince. A mix of his mother's maiden name, Prince, and his half-blood status. It was his alter ego, a better version of himself. A version no one could touch, but it wasn't. All doom and hexes. Snape mastered occlumency and legilimency, basically the magical arts of keeping people out of your mind and sneaking into theirs. Trust issues? Oh, he majored in those. These skills weren't just academic, they were survival tools. When your heart's already under lock and key, knowing how to guard your mind is just good practice. And while other students chased love or popularity or butterbeer-induced bravery, Snape was in the dungeons, brewing both potions and grudges. Lily was drifting further away, James was closing in, and the whispers about a rising Dark Lord were getting louder by the day. But Snape? He was listening. He always listened. And when the time came to choose sides, he made a decision that would change everything. Let's not sugarcoat it. Snape made a deal with the devil. Or at least with the snake-faced British version of one. After Hogwarts, he officially joined Voldemort and the Death Eaters, trading textbooks for torture spells and robes for, well, darker robes. It wasn't just about ideology, although, yeah, he did buy into that pure-blood supremacy nonsense for a time. But for Snape, it was also about power, control, and finally belonging somewhere, even if that somewhere required you to brand your forearm like cattle. But here's where the irony hits like a bludger to the face. While spying for Voldemort, Snape overheard a prophecy made by Professor Trelawney. Yes, the woman with the shawls and sherry breath. It spoke of a child with the power to defeat the Dark Lord. And Snape? He ran straight to Voldemort with the info like a loyal follower. One small detail he didn't know at the time, the prophecy pointed to Harry Potter, aka Lily's son. Oops. You can almost hear the panic set in when he realized what he'd done. It wasn't just any child Voldemort wanted dead. It was her child. And suddenly, the Death Eater robes didn't feel so cool anymore. Desperate, Snape went to the one person who might help, Dumbledore. That's like asking a vegan for steak. But to Snape's credit, he begged. He offered anything, everything, if Dumbledore could protect Lily. Not James. Not Harry. Just Lily. And Dumbledore, ever the cryptic chess master, agreed to help. He placed the Potters in hiding with the Fidelius charm. But, plot twist, their secret keeper Peter Pettigrew betrayed them. Lily and James died. Harry lived. And Snape? He crumbled. The man who had once whispered death into Voldemort's ear was now sobbing on the floor of the headmaster's office, shattered by the consequence of his own ambition. It's in the Deathly Hallows. And it's raw. It's the first time we see the man behind the mask. This was his turning point. The line in the sand. Snape pledged himself to Dumbledore, not out of heroism, but guilt, devotion born from destruction. And so began his long, lonely life as a double agent, loved by no one, trusted by few, risking everything to fix a mistake that could never truly be undone. But even as he took that path of redemption, there were complications. Snape didn't suddenly become good. He just became loyal. And loyalty in his world meant sacrifice. Especially when the war was far from over and Voldemort was only getting started. Snape didn't wear his guilt on his sleeve. He brewed it slowly, like a poison he drank every day. After Lily's death, he didn't just feel sorry. He lived sorry. And the weird part? He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted punishment. So, he threw himself into the most dangerous job imaginable, being Dumbledore's spy while pretending to serve the Dark Lord. That's like juggling knives while blindfolded, in a thunderstorm, with Dementors judging your technique. Still, he protected Harry. Always, even when he clearly couldn't stand the kid. Let's be honest, Snape saw James Potter every time he looked at Harry's messy hair and smug grin. And, let's not forget, Harry did inherit James's ability to test every teacher's last nerve. But then there were those eyes, Lily's eyes. Snape noticed. He always noticed. And despite his bitterness, he watched over Harry like a haunted bodyguard, with a grudge and a tragic backstory. He didn't just spy on Voldemort, he played the part so convincingly that even the other Death Eaters didn't fully trust him. And that's saying something, considering they trusted Bellatrix Lestrange, who was basically Voldemort with better hair. Snape gave Dumbledore the edge he needed during the war, feeding him intel, manipulating the enemy, and always walking a tightrope with no safety net. His entire life became a performance. No applause, no encore, and then came the ultimate plot twist. Dumbledore was dying, not from a curse. From a curse, literally, the one from the cursed ring in Half-Blood Prince, and he asked him to kill him when the time was right. Imagine that, your only ally, your last connection to the woman you loved, telling you, hey, when I give you the nod, end me. And Snape did it, not out of hate, not out of ambition, out of duty, because Dumbledore trusted him to see the plan through, even if the whole world saw a villain. That moment on the astronomy tower wasn't about power, it was about pain. Snape looked Dumbledore in the eye and did what no one else could. Avada Kedavra. And just like that, the only person who really knew who he was gone. From then on, Snape stood completely alone. But still, he didn't. Halder, he returned to Voldemort's side, headmaster of Hogwarts, playing the villain once again, while secretly trying to keep the students safe. At least the ones not actively trying to set him on fire. And even then, the stakes kept rising. Voldemort was after the Elder Wand, believed Snape was its master, and Snape knew that was going to end badly. But by then, his path was set. There was no turning back, only forward, toward one final brutal act that would seal his fate forever. There's something painfully poetic about how Snape died, cornered. Like a pawn in a game he was too smart to lose, but too loyal to win. Voldemort, in his usual genius logic, read none, decided Snape had to die so he could truly master the Elder Wand. So, what does he who can't Google do? He orders Nagini to kill Snape. Not a duel, not even a clean curse, just a glass cage, a giant snake, and a betrayal that sealed one of the most tragic deaths in the series. But even in those final moments, Snape wasn't thinking about revenge. He wasn't begging for mercy or listing excuses. He had one last request for Harry. Look at me. Those were his final words. Not dramatic, not heroic, just a plea to see Lily's eyes one more time. It was gut-wrenching, and if you didn't cry at that scene in the Deathly Hallows, I respectfully suggest you check if your heart is made of stone. Then came the memories. The truth. The floodgates opened. And suddenly Harry, and all of us, saw Snape not as the bitter, greasy-haired dungeon bat, but as a man who loved once, lost forever, and chose to protect the boy who represented everything he hated, and everything he loved. It was messy, complicated, human, and probably the deepest redemption arc in the entire series. Dumbledore said, "You are the bravest man I ever knew." And yeah, he meant it. After the war, Harry didn't forget. He made damn sure Snape's portrait was placed in Hogwarts where it belonged, not hidden, not erased. He even named his son Albus Severus and told him, "You were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew." That line right there, that was the legacy. That was Harry rewriting the way the world would remember him. Because Snape's story wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about being good. It was about making the hard choice again and again, even when no one saw and no one would thank him. He was the man in the shadows, the one who stood guard at the gate, not for glory, but because it was right. He didn't get the parade. He got a painful end. But he also got the truth, finally told. And somewhere, in that cold silence after everything, Snape found peace. His war was over. But for us, his story lingers. The story of a man who loved deeply, lost terribly, and still found a way to protect what remained, even when it destroyed him. But before we wrap this up, let me ask you something. So, what do you think? Was Snape a hero trapped in a villain's role? Or just a bitter man who made a few noble choices? His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, like how love can turn into obsession, or how doing the right thing doesn't always make you likable. But maybe, just maybe, that's what makes him unforgettable. I want to hear from you. Do you think Snape deserved more recognition while he was alive? Would you have forgiven him if you were in Harry's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading everything. And hey, if this video made you rethink everything you knew about Severus Snape, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications, because we've got a lot more coming that dives even deeper into the psychology and legacy of your favorite characters. And if you're still curious, you need to watch this next video. The hidden truth behind the creation of the Deathly Hallows. Click it now. Seriously, the real story might just blow your mind.